the psychotronic generator. In the winter of 1965, deep within the closed city of Novosibirsk 90, a facility that didn't appear on any map, Soviet scientists activated a device that would later be described as a window into the mechanics of human will. The laboratory, hidden beneath 300 meters of Siberian permafrost, was part of a network of secret research centers where the USSR poured billions of rubles into projects the Pentagon could only theorize about. The device itself was deceptively simple in appearance. A cylindrical chamber, roughly 2 meters tall, wrapped in copper coils and surrounded by rotating magnetic rings. Inside, a series of quartz crystals suspended in a vacuum tube pulsed with synchronized electromagnetic fields. The lead physicist, Dr. Viktor Sedlitsky, had spent 12 years developing what he called a psychotronic generator, a machine capable of transmitting focused mental commands across distances without any physical medium. The theory was radical but grounded in emerging quantum biology. Sedlitsky believed that human consciousness generated measurable electromagnetic signatures that could be amplified, directed, and received by other biological systems. In essence, thoughts could become weapons. The implications were staggering. A soldier could disable an enemy without firing a shot. An operative could influence decisions from across a room. Interrogations would become obsolete. The first successful test involved 2 subjects separated by a concrete wall 3 meters thick. The sender, connected to the psychotronic generator through a modified EEG helmet, was instructed to visualize a simple command: stand up. The receiver, seated in a sealed chamber with no visual or auditory contact, suddenly rose from his chair without conscious intention. When questioned, he described an overwhelming compulsion, as if his body had acted before his mind could protest. Over the following months, the tests escalated dramatically. Subjects reported receiving not just commands, but emotions, images, even fragments of memory that were not their own. In one disturbing trial, a receiver began speaking in a language he had never learned, repeating phrases that matched the sender's native dialect word for word. The accuracy rate climbed above 70%, far beyond statistical chance, far beyond anything explainable by conventional neuroscience. But the breakthrough came with a devastating cost. Several receivers developed severe psychological symptoms after prolonged exposure: dissociation, paranoia, and in 2 cases, complete catatonia. One subject, a young lieutenant named Mikhail Kozlov, claimed he could still hear voices weeks after the experiment ended. He described them as thoughts that aren't mine, pressing against the inside of my skull. 3 months later, he was found dead in his barracks. The official report listed suicide. No autopsy was performed. Word of the psychotronic generator reached the upper echelons of Soviet military command. But rather than accelerating the program, something unexpected happened. The project was immediately reclassified to a level above even KGB access. Within 2 weeks, the facility was evacuated, equipment dismantled, and all personnel reassigned to different cities with orders never to contact one another. Dr. Sedlitsky was relocated to a provincial university teaching position. He never published another paper. When tracked down by a Western journalist in 1989, shortly before his death, he gave only one cryptic statement: "We proved that consciousness is not locked inside the skull, but some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again." If the psychotronic generator truly worked, it rendered traditional warfare obsolete and made free will itself a vulnerability. The scalar wave cannon. In July 1976, Soviet engineers stationed at the Semipalatinsk test site in Kazakhstan activated a weapon that military analysts would later describe as the end of missile defense. Unlike traditional directed energy weapons that relied on lasers or particle beams, this system operated on a principle so obscure that even decades later, Western scientists struggle to replicate it. The device was called the scalar wave cannon, and according to fragmented intelligence reports, it could disable incoming warheads without leaving a trace. The technology emerged from research into longitudinal electromagnetic waves, a theoretical form of energy that Nikola Tesla had proposed but never fully developed. Soviet physicist Dr. Gennady Shipov, working under the auspices of the Ministry of Defense, believed these waves could be generated, focused, and weaponized. Unlike conventional electromagnetic radiation that spreads in transverse waves, scalar waves were hypothesized to travel in straight lines through matter itself, undetectable by standard sensors, capable of interfering with electronic systems at the quantum level. The prototype installation occupied a reinforced bunker covering 3 hectares. At its core was a massive toroidal coil system, powered by a dedicated nuclear reactor, capable of generating pulses measured in gigawatts. When activated, the cannon produced no visible beam, no sound, no thermal signature. Yet test warheads traveling at Mach 6 suddenly veered off course or detonated prematurely, miles before reaching their targets. Radar systems showed no interference. The missiles simply failed, as if their guidance systems had been rewritten mid-flight. In one classified test observed by senior military officials, 3 dummy warheads were launched simultaneously from different trajectories. The scalar cannon engaged for less than 4 seconds. All 3 warheads experienced catastrophic system failures at the exact same moment, despite being separated by dozens of kilometers. The success rate was absolute. Not one warhead reached its intended impact zone. The implications terrified both sides of the Iron Curtain. If the Soviet Union possessed a weapon that could neutralize America's nuclear arsenal with perfect reliability, the doctrine of mutually assured destruction would collapse. The balance of power that had prevented World War III for 3 decades would evaporate overnight. The Pentagon would be forced to either develop a countermeasure or accept strategic irrelevance. But then, something extraordinary happened. According to a former Soviet defense minister who defected in 1991, the United States and the USSR entered into secret negotiations, the kind never documented, never acknowledged. Both superpowers agreed that scalar wave technology was too destabilizing. If one side deployed it, the other would be forced to respond, triggering an arms race that neither could afford and neither could win. Within 6 months of the successful tests, the Semipalatinsk installation was quietly decommissioned. The reactor was disconnected. The toroidal coils were dismantled and melted down. All technical documentation was ordered destroyed under the direct authority of the Politburo. Engineers who worked on the project were reassigned to civilian roles, their security clearances revoked. Dr. Shipov himself was removed from weapons research entirely. He spent his remaining years teaching theoretical physics at Moscow State University. In a rare interview given shortly before his death in 2003, he was asked whether the scalar cannon had been real. His response was carefully measured. "We built many things during the Cold War. Some of them worked too well. Today, the scalar wave cannon exists only in rumor and redacted documents, yet both nations maintain massive classified directed energy budgets, as if still searching for something they once had and lost." The teleportation chamber. In October 1981, in the underground laboratories of Installation 47 near the closed city of Krasnoyarsk 26, Soviet physicists achieved what had been considered impossible since Einstein first proposed quantum entanglement. They successfully transported a physical object from one sealed chamber to another, separated by 17 meters of reinforced concrete, without any visible means of transfer. The object, a small metallic sphere engraved with identification marks, vanished from Chamber A and instantaneously appeared in Chamber B. No tunnel connected them. No mechanism moved between them. The sphere simply ceased to exist in one location and existed in another. The project, codenamed Operation Kvant, had been running in absolute secrecy since 1973. Its theoretical foundation rested on advanced interpretations of quantum mechanics that Western physicists had dismissed as mathematically interesting but physically unrealizable. The lead scientist, Dr. Alexander Frolov, believed that matter could be disassembled at the quantum level, its information transmitted through what he called non-local channels, and reassembled at a target location with perfect fidelity. The apparatus itself was staggering in its complexity. Each chamber contained a lattice of superconducting magnets cooled to near absolute zero, creating a quantum isolation field. Inside this field, powerful laser arrays bombarded the target object from multiple angles, mapping its atomic structure with unprecedented precision. The data was then encoded into a beam of entangled photons and transmitted to the receiving chamber, where the reverse process occurred, matter reconstructed from pure information. Initial tests used simple objects, crystals, metal samples, eventually a live bacterium. In each case, detailed analysis revealed that the transported object was identical to the original at the molecular level. But the breakthrough came when they attempted to transport something more complex, a laboratory mouse. The animal was sedated, placed in chamber A, and the system activated. 3 seconds later, the mouse appeared in chamber B. It was alive. It was breathing. And when it awoke minutes later, it behaved exactly as it had before transport. Military observers recognized the implications immediately. If living organisms could be teleported, then soldiers could be deployed behind enemy lines without crossing borders. Nuclear warheads could be delivered without missiles. Entire armies could vanish from one location and materialize in another. The strategic advantage would be absolute and irreversible. But the tests also revealed something deeply disturbing. When scientists examined the transported mouse at the cellular level, they discovered minute inconsistencies, errors in DNA transcription that hadn't existed before. The mouse appeared healthy, but its genetic code had been subtly corrupted. Within 3 weeks, it developed tumors. Within 5, it was dead. The fidelity of the teleportation was 99.9997%, but for an organism with trillions of cells, that remaining fraction was lethal. Then came the accident that ended everything. In March 1983, a technician named Dmitry Volkov entered Chamber A during a routine calibration. Due to a computer malfunction, the system activated while he was still inside. Witnesses in the control room watched in horror as Volkov's body flickered, became translucent, then vanished. The receiving chamber remained empty. Dmitry Volkov had not been transported. He had been erased from existence. Within weeks, orders came from Moscow. The teleportation project was to be permanently terminated. The chambers were filled with concrete. The superconducting magnets were cut apart and buried in separate locations. Dr. Frolov died in 1987 under circumstances officially described as a heart attack. If Operation Kvant succeeded, humanity briefly possessed the ability to move matter through space without traversing the distance between, before learning that some boundaries carry a price measured in the very substance of what we are. The Weather Domination System. On December 14, 1979, American meteorologists detected an impossible anomaly over the Bering Sea. A massive low-pressure system, powerful enough to generate hurricane-force winds, appeared without warning in an area where atmospheric conditions should have made such formation impossible. The storm lasted exactly 72 hours, moved in a perfectly straight line, then dissipated as suddenly as it had formed. Weather satellites recorded the event, but the data made no sense. The system behaved as if it were being guided by an external force. They were right. Deep in the Ural Mountains, inside a facility known only as Object 501, Soviet scientists had activated what they called the Ionospheric Research Array, a system capable of manipulating weather patterns across thousands of kilometers. The technology was based on decades of research into atmospheric physics and electromagnetic wave propagation, and it represented the culmination of a secret program that had consumed billions of rubles and the careers of hundreds of scientists. The concept was elegant in its simplicity. By transmitting high-frequency electromagnetic waves into the ionosphere, the upper layer of Earth's atmosphere, it was possible to create localized heating effects. This heating would alter air pressure gradients, wind patterns, and moisture distribution. With precise calibration, these small changes could cascade into large-scale weather phenomena. Storms, droughts, fog banks dense enough to blind entire regions. The array itself was massive. Spread across 15 square kilometers of remote mountain terrain, it consisted of 180 antenna towers, each 72 meters tall, arranged in a precise geometric pattern. Underground power stations fed the system with 3.6 gigawatts of electricity, enough to power a small city. When fully activated, the array could focus electromagnetic energy into a single point in the ionosphere, creating a thermal lens that redirected atmospheric currents like an invisible hand pushing clouds across the sky. The December 1979 test had been designed to demonstrate the system's capability to foreign adversaries without revealing its source. A storm generated over neutral waters, powerful but not destructive, lasting just long enough to be noticed but not long enough to trigger international investigation. The message was clear. The Soviet Union possessed the ability to weaponize the weather itself. But the technology's true potential went far beyond demonstrations. Internal documents outlined scenarios where the system could be used to flood enemy territories by steering monsoons, create droughts to destroy harvests, generate blizzards to paralyze supply lines, or clear skies to enable bomber runs. Weather, the ultimate force of nature, could become a tool of war, one that left no evidence, no signatures, no way to prove the attack had been deliberate. Then, in 1983, the array fell silent. When reconnaissance satellites finally captured clear images of the site, they saw construction vehicles and demolition equipment. The antenna towers were being dismantled. By 1985, Object 501 had been reduced to empty concrete foundations and severed cables. Declassified KGB memos later revealed why. In July 1982, the array had been used to divert a storm system away from Soviet agricultural regions. The operation was successful, but the diverted storm intensified as it moved, eventually striking the Black Sea coast with unexpected ferocity. Flooding killed 127 people. Entire villages were washed away. The disaster exposed a fundamental flaw. Atmospheric systems were too complex to control with precision. The weapon was too dangerous to wield, not just against enemies, but against the nation that controlled it. The plasma shield generator. In September 1987, at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, Soviet military observers witnessed a test that challenged everything they understood about missile defense. An incoming ballistic warhead, traveling at Mach 23, encountered an invisible barrier 3 kilometers above the ground and disintegrated instantly. No explosion occurred. No fragments reached the surface. The warhead simply ceased to exist, converted to superheated plasma and dispersed across the atmosphere in a brilliant flash of light. The technology responsible was called the plasma shield generator, and it represented the culmination of 15 years of research into high-energy physics and electromagnetic field theory. The system created a dome of ionized air above a protected area, a wall of plasma so dense and energetic that anything passing through it would be vaporized on contact. Unlike conventional missile defense systems that relied on kinetic interceptors or laser targeting, the plasma shield was passive, omnidirectional, and theoretically impossible to defeat through speed or maneuver. The generator itself occupied a facility the size of a football stadium. At its heart was a massive particle accelerator that produced streams of electrons at near-light velocity. These electrons were injected into the atmosphere through a network of emitter towers, where powerful magnetic fields shaped them into a hemispherical barrier. When activated, the shield consumed 8.2 gigawatts of power, equivalent to the output of 6 nuclear reactors, and could only be sustained for brief intervals before the equipment overheated. But during those intervals, it was invincible. Test after test confirmed the same result. Any solid object entering the plasma field was instantly converted to gas. Warheads disintegrated. Aircraft would have been annihilated. Even satellites in low orbit would be destroyed if they passed through the active zone. The shield created an absolute no-fly zone, a sphere of death that nothing could penetrate and survive. Soviet military planners immediately recognized the strategic revolution. If plasma shield generators could be deployed around major cities and military installations, the USSR would become immune to nuclear attack. America's vast arsenal of ICBMs would be rendered obsolete overnight. The balance of terror that had prevented World War III would collapse, with the Soviet Union holding an unassailable defensive advantage. But the technology came with crippling limitations. The energy requirements were astronomical. A single generator protecting Moscow would require a dedicated nuclear power complex. The equipment was delicate, requiring constant maintenance and cooling. Most critically, the shield could only be activated for 90 seconds at a time before components began to fail. It was a defensive weapon that could only defend in brief, carefully timed bursts. Despite these constraints, plans were drawn to construct a network of plasma generators around key strategic targets. Construction began at 3 sites in 1988. Then, abruptly, the program was terminated. Declassified documents reveal the reason. The Americans had been watching. Spy satellites detected the construction activity and the massive power infrastructure being installed. In response, the United States accelerated development of MIRV warheads, capable of deploying dozens of nuclear bombs from a single missile. Soviet planners realized they had triggered exactly the arms race they hoped to prevent. By developing an impenetrable shield, they had forced their adversaries to develop unstoppable weapons. The decision was made at the highest levels of Soviet leadership. The plasma shield would be abandoned. Not because it didn't work, but because its existence made the world less safe. The shield that was meant to protect became the catalyst for the very war it sought to prevent. The time dilation chamber. In March 1984, in a laboratory complex buried beneath the Ural Mountains, Soviet physicists conducted an experiment that would later be dismissed as impossible by mainstream science. They placed a German-made mechanical clock inside a sealed chamber lined with superconducting magnets and activated a system designed to manipulate the local flow of time. When the chamber was opened 6 hours later, according to external measurements, the clock inside showed that only 3 hours and 17 minutes had passed. The technology was designated Project Kronos, and it emerged from theoretical work on Einstein's relativity combined with emerging quantum field theory. The lead scientist, Dr. Mikhail Terekov, believed that by generating extremely powerful rotating magnetic fields combined with high-frequency gravitational wave emissions, it was possible to create a localized distortion in spacetime, a bubble where time moved at a different rate than the surrounding universe. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering. A spherical titanium shell 5 meters in diameter, surrounded by 3 nested layers of rotating superconducting magnets cooled to within degrees of absolute zero. Inside, a gravitational wave generator, technology that wouldn't be officially invented for another 30 years, produced pulses designed to compress spacetime in precise patterns. The power requirements were staggering. 2 dedicated nuclear reactors operating at full capacity. Initial tests used simple mechanical clocks and radioactive isotopes with known decay rates. The results were consistent and disturbing. Objects inside the chamber experienced time more slowly than objects outside. The effect was small, a few percentage points, but it was measurable, repeatable, and theoretically scalable. If the magnetic field strength and gravitational wave intensity could be increased, the time dilation effect would increase proportionally. The military implications were immediately apparent. Soldiers inside a time dilation field would experience battle in slow motion, giving them a decisive advantage in reaction time and tactical planning. A missile traveling through a time compression field would arrive at its target faster than defenders could respond. Aging could be slowed, potentially extending the operational lifespan of elite personnel. The technology could revolutionize not just warfare, but human existence itself. But the experiments revealed something unexpected and deeply troubling. Living organisms placed inside the chamber experienced severe physiological stress. A laboratory rat exposed to significant time dilation developed aggressive tumors within days. Its cells aged rapidly even though less time had passed for them subjectively, as if the compression of time disrupted the fundamental biological rhythms that govern cellular function. The most disturbing test came in November 1984. A volunteer, Lieutenant Sergei Karpov, entered the chamber for a planned 30-minute exposure to mild time dilation. External observers tracked his vital signs through monitoring equipment. Everything appeared normal. But when the chamber was opened, Karpov emerged in a state of extreme psychological distress. He claimed he had been inside for hours, maybe days, though only 28 minutes had passed externally. Psychiatric evaluation revealed that Karpov had experienced time not as a smooth, continuous flow, but as a series of disjointed moments, present, past, and future bleeding into each other. Within 2 weeks, Karpov developed severe depression. Within 3 months, he was institutionalized with treatment-resistant psychotic disorder. He died by suicide in 1986. Following Karpov's death, Project Kronos was immediately suspended. The technology could alter time, but human minds, evolved to perceive time in a specific linear fashion, couldn't adapt to the change without catastrophic psychological breakdown. The chamber was deactivated and sealed. If Project Kronos succeeded, humanity briefly possessed the ability to step outside the normal flow of time, before learning that consciousness itself is bound to that flow more deeply than we realized. The particle disintegration ray. On August 22, 1979, at the Sari Shagan test range in Kazakhstan, A weapon was fired that shouldn't have existed according to contemporary physics. An invisible beam struck a decommissioned T-55 tank at a distance of 1,200 meters. The tank didn't explode. It didn't burn. It simply collapsed into a pile of fine dust, as if its atomic bonds had been severed instantaneously. The entire process took less than 3 seconds. The weapon was officially designated the particle disintegration ray, though researchers privately called it the eraser. Its theoretical foundation rested on quantum chromodynamics, the study of strong nuclear forces that hold atomic nuclei together. Soviet physicist Dr. Leonid Kirilenko had discovered that by generating a beam of precisely tuned neutral particles at extreme energies, it was possible to disrupt these strong forces over a limited area. Atoms would literally fall apart, their protons and neutrons no longer bound together, their electrons scattering into free space. The device that produced this effect was enormous. A linear particle accelerator 300 meters long, powered by a nuclear reactor, requiring a dedicated facility and a team of 73 specialists to operate, could only fire once every 4 hours due to cooling requirements. But when it fired, nothing could withstand it. Armor was meaningless. Distance was irrelevant up to 2 kilometers. Any target in the beam path would be reduced to its constituent atoms and scattered as dust. Test footage, later leaked by a defector, showed the ray in action against various targets. Concrete bunkers crumbled. Steel plates evaporated. A live cow, used as a biological test subject, vanished in a flash of light, leaving only a circular burn mark on the ground. The weapon left no radiation, no toxic residue, no evidence beyond the absence of whatever had been destroyed. Military planners immediately recognized the strategic implications. A weapon that could erase fortifications, destroy enemy armor, and eliminate biological targets without collateral damage would revolutionize warfare. Entire armies could be neutralized without dropping bombs. Cities could be threatened without nuclear weapons. The particle disintegration ray was the ultimate precision instrument, a weapon that removed only its target and nothing else. But operational deployment proved impossible. The enormous size and power requirements meant the ray could only be used from fixed installations. It couldn't be mounted on aircraft or vehicles. Any battlefield use would require transporting hundreds of tons of equipment and establishing a nuclear power supply in a combat zone. The weapon was devastating but effectively immobile. Worse, the particle beam had a fatal limitation: atmospheric interference. Water vapor, dust, and air molecules scattered the particle beam, reducing its effective range and coherence. In humid or dusty conditions, the ray became useless beyond a few hundred meters. Weather could render the ultimate weapon completely ineffective. Despite these limitations, research continued. Scientists worked on miniaturization, alternative power sources, and beam-focusing techniques that could overcome atmospheric scattering. Progress was slow but steady. By 1982, a second-generation prototype reduced the accelerator length to 80 meters and improved range to 3 kilometers under ideal conditions. Then came the revelation that ended the program. Intelligence reports indicated that the United States had detected Soviet particle beam research and was developing countermeasures. The solution was elegant and terrifying. Deploy clouds of metallic chaff, fine metal particles suspended in the atmosphere, over potential targets. More disturbing was the realization that particle beam technology could potentially be tuned to catalyze nuclear reactions in uranium or plutonium deposits, or in nuclear warheads. In 1983, Project Eraser was officially canceled. Dr. Kirilenko later wrote, "We proved that matter itself is more fragile than anyone imagined. But breaking things is easy. What's difficult is ensuring that breaking them doesn't break everything else." The weapon succeeded too completely, revealing that the line between a weapon and a catastrophe is sometimes impossible to see until after it's been crossed. The neural interface helmet. In February 1978, at a classified laboratory within the Kurchatov Institute in Moscow, Soviet neuroscientists unveiled a device that promised to merge human consciousness directly with computer systems. The neural interface helmet was not a crude brain-computer interface of the type that would emerge decades later in consumer technology. It was something far more sophisticated, a bidirectional system that could both read neural activity and write information directly into the brain's cortex. The device resembled a pilot's helmet, but its interior was lined with thousands of microscopic electrodes arranged in a pattern that mapped precisely to the brain's functional regions. These electrodes used a proprietary conductive gel that allowed signals to pass through the skull without surgical implantation. When activated, the helmet could detect neural firing patterns associated with specific thoughts, emotions, and sensory experiences. More remarkably, it could generate electrical signals that induced those same experiences artificially. Lead researcher Dr. Svetlana Ivanova had spent 12 years developing the technology, building on classified Soviet research into neuroscience that Western scientists wouldn't approach for another generation. Her breakthrough came from understanding that the brain operates on electrical patterns that could be decoded, recorded, and replayed like a biological recording device. The first successful demonstration involved a test subject wearing the helmet while looking at a series of photographs. The system recorded the neural patterns associated with each image. Hours later, those patterns were replayed into a different subject's brain through the helmet. Without seeing the original photographs, the second subject accurately described their content, colors, shapes, even emotional tones. The information had been transferred from one mind to another through pure electrical signal. Military observers immediately recognized the implications. Knowledge could be transferred instantly between personnel. Languages could be implanted. Combat training could be uploaded directly into soldiers' brains without months of physical practice. The helmet could create a shared consciousness among units, allowing perfect coordination without radio communication. It was the ultimate force multiplier. But the experiments quickly revealed darker possibilities. When researchers attempted to implant complex procedural knowledge, the ability to pilot an aircraft, for example, subjects experienced severe disorientation. The information was present in their minds, but it felt foreign, like memories that belonged to someone else. Several test subjects developed dissociative disorders, unable to distinguish between their original memories and implanted ones. More disturbing were the military applications that emerged during planning sessions. The helmet could be used for interrogation, extracting information directly from prisoners' neural patterns. It could be weaponized to induce psychological states, fear, confusion, compliance in enemy soldiers. Worst of all, it could potentially be used for mass control, broadcasting neural patterns to entire populations through modified transmission systems. The program's end came after a catastrophic accident in October 1979. A senior technician, Igor Volsky, connected himself to the helmet system without proper supervision, attempting to record his own neural patterns for later study. Due to a calibration error, the system entered a feedback loop, continuously reading and writing the same signals. When colleagues found him 2 hours later, Volsky was catatonic. His brain locked in an endless recursive loop. He never fully recovered. For the remaining 11 years of his life, Volsky existed in a vegetative state, showing only occasional signs of awareness. Brain scans revealed that his neural pathways had been reorganized into patterns that neuroscientists couldn't interpret, as if his consciousness had been overwritten by static. Following the accident, the neural interface helmet program was immediately terminated. All equipment was destroyed. Dr. Ivanova was reassigned to a teaching position and forbidden from continuing neurotechnology research. She emigrated to Israel in 1991 and died in 2008, never having spoken publicly about her work. If her device truly functioned as described, it means the technology for direct neural interface existed decades before it was invented, and was buried because the human mind proved too fragile to safely merge with machines. The Gravity Nullification Platform. On June 11, 1974, in an underground test facility near the Caspian Sea, Soviet engineers activated a device that appeared to violate Newton's laws of motion. A 10-ton steel block, resting on a circular platform 6 meters in diameter, began to rise slowly into the air without any visible means of support. It hovered 3 meters above the ground for 47 seconds before settling back down as the system powered off. No cables, no jets, no magnetic levitation. The platform had somehow canceled gravity itself within its field of effect. The technology was codenamed Project Antigrav, and it emerged from theoretical work on gravitational wave manipulation and quantum vacuum engineering. The lead physicist, Dr. Boris Novikov, believed that gravity was not merely a curvature of spacetime but an interaction that could be actively opposed using carefully structured electromagnetic fields combined with exotic matter states. The platform itself was a marvel of engineering complexity. Its surface was composed of a metamaterial lattice, crystals arranged in a geometric pattern that didn't exist in nature, manufactured using techniques that remained classified. Beneath this lattice, a series of superconducting rings generated rotating magnetic fields at frequencies measured in terahertz. The entire system was cooled to near absolute zero and drew power from a dedicated nuclear reactor producing 1.2 gigawatts. When activated, instruments detected a localized distortion in spacetime directly above the platform. Objects within this distortion experienced reduced gravitational force, not eliminated, but significantly weakened. A 10-ton block felt like it weighed only a few hundred kilograms. With sufficient power, the effect could theoretically be scaled to make massive objects completely weightless. The military applications were revolutionary. Tanks could be transported by aircraft as if they weighed nothing. Ships could be lifted over obstacles. Missiles could carry payloads hundreds of times larger than conventional propulsion allowed. Most tantalizing, spacecraft could be launched without rockets, simply lifted through the atmosphere by gravity nullification platforms positioned at strategic altitudes. Soviet aerospace engineers immediately began designing orbital vehicles that incorporated the anti-gravity technology. Plans were drawn for launch facilities where spacecraft would rise vertically on nullification fields, then engage conventional engines only after reaching the upper atmosphere. The cost savings would be astronomical. Space travel would be transformed from an expensive rarity to a routine capability. But the technology had a fatal flaw that revealed itself during the seventh test. When the platform was activated at higher power levels to lift a 30-ton object, nearby personnel experienced severe physical symptoms: nausea, disorientation, internal bleeding. Medical examination revealed that their body's internal organs had shifted position, as if gravity had been altered not just for the test object but for everything within a 100-meter radius. Further testing confirmed the danger. The gravity nullification field couldn't be perfectly contained. It spread outward in unpredictable ways, creating zones where gravity was too weak and other zones where it was amplified. Human bodies, evolved to function under Earth's precise gravitational constant, couldn't tolerate these variations without severe damage. More troubling, the field effects persisted for hours after the platform was deactivated. Instruments detected lingering gravitational anomalies in the test area, small but measurable distortions that took nearly a day to dissipate. Repeated use of the platform would create cumulative distortions, potentially causing permanent alterations to local spacetime geometry. In August 1975, Project Antigrav was officially closed. The platform was dismantled, its exotic metamaterials were destroyed, and all documentation was classified at the highest level. Dr. Novikov was reassigned to conventional aerospace research and died in a car accident in 1983, an accident that witnesses described as impossible, as his vehicle appeared to have jumped over a guardrail as if weightless before crashing. If the gravity nullification platform truly worked, one of the fundamental forces of nature could be locally suppressed through engineering. Yet it vanished completely, suggesting whatever was discovered was too dangerous to allow continued development. The quantum consciousness transmitter. In November 1986, weeks before the Chernobyl disaster would consume Soviet resources and attention, researchers at a secret facility in Akademgorodok, the science city near Novosibirsk, completed the most radical experiment in the history of consciousness research. Using a device they called the quantum consciousness transmitter, they claimed to have successfully transferred a human being's complete consciousness, memories, personality, awareness, from one body to another. The theoretical foundation rested on quantum mind theories that wouldn't enter mainstream scientific discussion for decades. Lead scientist Dr. Arkady Volkov believed that consciousness was not generated by the brain's neurons, but was instead a quantum field phenomenon that the brain received and processed. If true, this field could theoretically be extracted, transmitted, and implanted into a different neural substrate, essentially moving a person's mind from one body to another. The transmitter system consisted of two sealed chambers connected by a quantum entanglement network. The first chamber contained a helmet similar to the neural interface device but orders of magnitude more sophisticated, capable of mapping not just neural firing patterns but the quantum states of individual neurons. The second chamber contained an identical receiving unit designed to impose those quantum states onto a recipient's brain. The experiment used two volunteers, Lieutenant Alexei Morozov, age 34, and Corporal Dmitry Sokolov, age 28. Both men underwent extensive psychological evaluation and gave written consent, though neither fully understood what they were agreeing to. On November 18, 1986, Morozov entered the transmission chamber. Sokolov entered the receiving chamber. The system activated for 17 minutes. When the chambers opened, both men were unconscious. Medical teams revived them and conducted immediate psychological assessment. What they discovered would haunt the program's participants for the rest of their lives. The man who entered as Morozov now claimed to be Sokolov. He possessed Sokolov's memories, spoke with Sokolov's speech patterns, and became agitated when addressed as Morozov. The man who entered as Sokolov claimed to be Morozov, demonstrating detailed knowledge of Morozov's childhood, military service, and personal relationships. The consciousness transfer appeared to have succeeded. The two men had switched minds. For 72 hours, researchers documented the phenomenon. Brain scans showed altered neural patterns. Psychological tests confirmed the personality swap. The men remained physically themselves but mentally inhabited each other's identities. It was impossible, yet it had happened. Then the deterioration began. Both men started experiencing memory confusion, fragments of their original identities bleeding through. Morozov's consciousness, now in Sokolov's body, began recalling events from Sokolov's life as if he had lived them. Sokolov's consciousness in Morozov's body couldn't maintain consistent memories. They were merging, fragmenting, losing coherence. Within a week, both men had developed severe dissociative identity disorder. They would shift between personalities, sometimes claiming to be Morozov, sometimes Sokolov, sometimes a confused hybrid of both. Neither could maintain a stable sense of self. Medical intervention proved useless. The quantum states that defined their consciousness had become entangled in ways that couldn't be separated. Both men were institutionalized. Morozov, in Sokolov's body, died 6 months later from what was officially listed as a stroke, but what nurses described as his brain simply giving up. Sokolov, in Morozov's body, survived until 1993, existing in a state of perpetual confusion, never certain who he was or had been. Dr. Volkov destroyed the transmitter personally, smashing the quantum entanglement equipment with a fire axe while security personnel watched in shock. He submitted a final report that concluded, "We proved that consciousness can be moved between bodies, but consciousness is not a discrete thing that can be relocated intact. It is a process, an ongoing interaction between mind and matter. When we transferred it, we didn't move a file from one computer to another. We tore apart two human souls and scattered the pieces. The quantum consciousness transmitter proved that the soul, if such a thing exists, might be movable. But moving it destroys what makes it human." Conclusion. These 10 experiments, scattered across 4 decades of the Cold War, form a pattern that is impossible to ignore. Each represented a breakthrough that challenged the boundaries of known science. Technologies that could manipulate consciousness, control weather, create plasma shields, alter time, and disintegrate matter at will. Weapons and systems so advanced that even today, decades later, they remain theoretical in mainstream science. But they shared another pattern: systematic suppression. Not because they failed, but because they succeeded. Each technology was tested, proven effective, then deliberately buried. Facilities were demolished. Equipment was destroyed. Scientists were silenced through reassignment, intimidation, or mysterious death. Documentation was classified beyond retrieval or simply burned. The Soviet Union invested billions of rubles and the collective genius of thousands of scientists into these programs. Then, having achieved their goals, they chose to pretend none of it had ever happened. Why? Because these technologies were too destabilizing, too powerful, too likely to trigger arms races that neither superpower could afford and neither could win. The psychotronic generator could have controlled minds but fractured them instead. The scalar wave cannon could have neutralized nuclear arsenals but required mutual suppression to prevent annihilation. The weather domination system could have reshaped climate but proved impossible to control. The plasma shield could have created perfect defense but prompted the development of overwhelming offense. The time dilation chamber could have given tactical advantages but destroyed human sanity. The particle disintegration ray could have erased any target but risked catalyzing nuclear catastrophe. The neural helmet could merge minds with machines but shattered consciousness. The gravity platform could lift anything but killed anyone nearby. The consciousness transmitter could move souls but dissolved identity itself. Each invention revealed a fundamental truth. Some technologies are not simply ahead of their time. They are outside the framework of stable civilization. They represent capabilities so absolute that possessing them guarantees either universal vulnerability or mutual destruction. The only rational response is burial. But that raises the deepest question. How much else has been discovered and then deliberately forgotten? How many other breakthroughs in energy, medicine, transportation, computation have been achieved in classified facilities and then sealed away because their implications threatened existing power structures? The Cold War may have ended, but the apparatus of suppression did not. It merely changed hands, adapted to new geopolitical realities, and continued its silent work of ensuring that certain knowledge remains forever classified. The experiments documented here survived only as fragments. Leaked memos, defector testimonies, fading memories of scientists who dared to speak before they died. Most evidence was destroyed too thoroughly to recover. Most witnesses were silenced too completely to testify. What we know is almost certainly just the visible edge of a much larger shadow. Perhaps that is the final lesson of these forbidden Soviet experiments. The greatest discoveries are not always the ones we celebrate. Sometimes they are the ones we choose to forget, because remembering them would force us to confront how fragile our world really is, and how close we came to breaking it forever with technologies we proved we could build but not control.